Good evening again, and welcome to all of you who have joined us. We're honored tonight to have two extremely knowledgeable people here to discuss the subject of microaggressions. Do you hear what you're saying? They are Robert Crouch, who is Associate Pastor for Volunteer Services at Fourth Church.
I just got a promotion.
Oh. Congratulations. And staff to the Racial Equity Council. And Regan Burke, a member of the Racial Equity Council and a 40-year plus member of Fourth Church. So we're going to begin now, and I just want to offer a note. There may be dialogue between Robert and Regan, the new associate pastor. That will sound contentious, but I can assure you that they are good friends and compatible colleagues, and the dialogue is meant to help us achieve our objectives, which is to offer examples of microaggressions, how we might unknowingly be committing microaggressions ourselves, and how we can become more aware of our own biases. So with that, I'll turn it over to Robert and Regan, R squared.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Can you hear me? So I just want to say, to start off with, that I'm old, and in case you hadn't noticed, and when you get old, some of the things that happen to you is that your hearing diminishes and your voice diminishes. So for those of you who don't know that, just be aware that there may be a sign that I may diminish my voice, and there may be a time when you can't hear me. So if you could just let me know. Robert's better at this than me. And also just bear with us. So there are microaggressions against old people, right? And we've tried to fix that with microphones because our hearing diminishes, and also with our voice. So this is one of the reasons we have the microphones. So welcome, everybody. We're really glad you're here.
Welcome, everyone, and as your new associate pastor, I may make some decisions, but I want to thank Nancy and the Planning Committee for inviting us into this conversation. I think it's a really important and critical conversation. I put up our church mission statement because for me, one of the really important aspects of microaggressions and understanding how they operate is to make sure we are promoting a welcoming and inclusive and serving environment. So we'll be talking about what those microaggressions are, how they work, and microaggressions, I think the term is relatively new. I know back in my Diversity 101 days, back in the 70s and the 60s and beyond, we didn't really talk about microaggressions. We just talked more about representation and didn't talk really a lot about relationships. But for me, microaggressions really speak to the heart of how we are in community with one another, how we relate to one another. And I always like to fall back on our mission statement because there are some really important words in there about being welcoming, being inclusive, serving. And it's so important to have this tool around microaggressions so that we keep our relationships at a good place and make sure people who come into our community are not unintentionally offended, and that we are doing everything we can to provide a welcoming environment. So again, thank you, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion and our interaction. And this is a discussion, so we don't want to just talk at you all evening, but we want you to engage. You have in front of you a microaggressions quiz, which we decided to kick off with that as a way to see what we know about microaggressions and to move our thinking along the lines of microaggressions. And we also want to use it as an icebreaker. So we invite you to complete the quiz. We want you to have some interactions at your table, and there may be items that are not in the prescribed answers that you think of or that come to your mind, and we would like to hear from each table. So we're going to give you 5 minutes to complete that quiz, have some conversation at your table, and hopefully it will frame your understanding of what microaggressions are. Does anyone need a pen?
All right, are we all ready? Is everybody ready to give their answers? Well, of course, John Klum is, because he's a perfect student. All right. All right, so our first question, what is the definition of microaggression? I'm going to read off your choices. A, subtle insults or slurs. B, compliments with hidden intent. C, unintentional behavior. And D, overt acts of discrimination. So what do you think is the correct answer? Anybody? John? Could you please use the microphone so that we're not committing microaggressions against people who can't hear?
I would think A, B, and C.
Aha. Anybody else? Say it again, please. He was thinking A, B, and C. Chuck?
Would it,
Chuck.
would it possibly be dependent upon how it's received
No.
by the person? You know, where one person might think it's microaggression, another person might not.
That's a good question. And we'll get to that, but that is really a good question. Who else? Who else has an answer? Somebody raised their hand that I missed. Yeah. Could,
Okay, A.
Good. A, okay. Anybody else?
We said A and B.
Okay, so here is the correct answer. A subtle insult or slur. So a microaggression is subtle, it's unintentional, and what it does, the result of it is that it marginalizes others. So it's unintentional, and it's subtle, and it marginalizes others. And we can talk more about that, but in marginalizing others, what we do when we commit a microaggression is we make ourselves superior to the person we're talking to, or more important, or more worthy, you might say. An example. Okay, I have plenty of examples, but I'm going to use examples that are sort of generic, so I don't single anybody out. All right, so when an airport gate agent asks, if you're black, asks you, why are you in line for business class? Subtle, right? But insulting, but subtle and unintentional, especially from somebody who's official. I'll give you another one, okay, Robert. When someone tells you, you're so pretty that they don't even think of you as black. So that tells me that all of you have either experienced that or know exactly what that means, or have probably said it yourself, because I've said many of these things myself. So I'm going to go to the next question, Robert.
And
Yeah.
the next question, which group of people are most affected by microaggressions? A, disabled individuals. B, LGBTQ plus individuals. C, racial and ethnic minorities. D, all of the above.
The safe answer to so many multiple choice questions is all of the above.
That is correct, all of the above, and we didn't list all the possibilities. I don't know if anyone discussed other possibilities at your table, but Gender is a factor, age, citizenship, and now with immigration status and what's going on in our country, citizenship is an issue, sexual orientation. So it can be, and Regan has already mentioned age, so there are others than just what's listed here. Did anyone have any other communities?
Sexism is like a real thing.
Who's saying that? Oh, that's back there. Sexism is, yes. So there are other groups.
Misogyny, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. What was that?
Intelligence.
Intelligence. Yes. That's a good one.
All right. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Oh, let's go on to the next question. Ready? Anybody have anything else they want to say? Intelligence, yeah. All right.
And Regan,
Yes.
wait.
Yeah. And what?
Wait.
Oh, wait, yeah. All right, look,
Did you say weight?
she said wait, yeah. Which Body.
Obesity.
Body.
body?
Yes, yes.
It's body or body image. You know, I have a friend who's has no problem with body image, and he has set his intention to not think about body image whenever he meets anybody or sees anybody or with his own family. So that's his intention, is to use body image as a way to break his own microaggression as a practice. He's doing that as a practice. Yeah. Okay. What number are we on? What number are we on? 1, 2, 3.
Three.
Okay, got
We're
it.
on 3.
All right, got it. Okay. How can microaggressions impact Fourth Church? A, enhance a sense of belonging. B, foster a stronger sense of community. C, create a welcoming atmosphere. D, promote exclusion and disengagement.
D.
D. So we all know that's D.
What's the answer?
D.
D.
D?
Yeah, right. So microaggression does exclude people. And let me give you an example. So now I am going to use personal. So if Robert and Nancy, if Nancy were standing at a coffee hour talking to Robert, and I came up and started talking to Nancy and excluded Robert from our conversation if we were talking about something that he had nothing to do with, and just, talk to her, and then she talks back to me, right? How do you think that makes Robert feel, right? It's as if I'm saying to Robert, my conversation is more important than yours, than what you were doing. And this is something that, you might see or do happening a lot. But, and somebody mentioned, you mentioned sexism. This happens to women all the time in this church, right? And of course, it happens to Robert in this church, right?
And one thing I want to call out, and I don't think we've said this, but microaggressions can be both verbal and nonverbal. I mean, it doesn't have to be something spoken. And one piece of feedback I get from our congregation, and we all love our congregation, and we have a lot of opportunity to be better at community, but I often hear people say, I sat in the sanctuary and no one spoke to me. And for people who are not the dominant culture, that is translated into, you are not welcome here, you are not wanted here, and that's something I hear often. Another thing that I hear in our congregation for our congregants of color, when they walk into the church during the week, they're pointed to the social services center. So it's automatically assumed that they're here for a reason other than attending a meeting or CLL or Cornerstones or something. But those are things that surface that sets up this whole notion of inferior, superior, and making, and a lot of microaggressions are steeped in our stereotypes, our socialization of what's good, perfect, excellent, and sometimes our comments and thoughts come from that place. We all do it because we've been socialized in specific ways, and all of us, it takes time to investigate our own biases and stereotypes and things that we believe through our life. But they happen, and it's a very real thing.
I want to add to this. This is an answer to your question, Chuck. So if in that example with Nancy and Robert, that could happen to any of us. It could happen to a group of men, group of women. It could happen to any of us. It is what happens, what Robert feels, right? It's what he feels. So we know now, in the past few years, a lot of people have been into anti-racist trainings or have read articles or seen movies or TV series or news articles about microaggressions and how the other person feels, right? So that other person feels excluded, right? So we are practicing racism, an anti-black microaggression against Robert, right? Because we now are educated in this, at least in our culture. We know he feels that way, right? There's no excuse for me to not know that anymore. And at least, for me, Regan, who said a lot of anti-racist training, and and Robert's my friend, so we talk about this often, but I also talk about this in in groups of white people too, so we know that people know this,
Questions? Anybody have any questions or comments on that issue or other issues at this point? One of the things, too, I want to stress here is a lot of times these actions are subtle, and we have to keep in mind that people come into our space bringing their entire history. And how we receive and hear and respond to certain things is based on what our life experiences have been and what our journey has been. So a lot of what we bring into the space is the lens of what our life experience has been. And we have to be real careful not to take those offenses personally, but something that's really key in learning how to navigate microaggressions is high emotional intelligence, empathy, compassion, and what can you do to make those who come into our community feel more welcome. It's a very intentional thing, and a lot of times we have to unlearn what we've learned in our life because we have learned that things are a certain way, and we sometimes make statements that reflect our stereotypes and biases and whatever. Like, you got that job because of affirmative action or a quota system. I heard that through my career before I became a pastor. I would hear that a lot. Not that it was my hard work and my effort and whatever, but that says something. There's a very clear message in that, but that comes from a place of socialization where we learn to have certain attitudes and behaviors toward various groups of people. How should you respond to microaggressions as a witness? A, ignore it. B, speak up. C, report it to a church leader, both B and C. B?
I'd say B and C.
Did someone say B and C? John?
Who else has an answer?
Did anyone have anything different at your tables? Go ahead.
Well, I have a question. My question, I'm not a member of Fourth Church, and my question is, most of us are of an age when we didn't tattle on people, or we were taught not to tattle. So the idea of speaking to someone of authority regarding observing or participating in a microaggression seems opposed to what we've been raised to do. But I'm getting the sense that Fourth Church is, perhaps not all of a sudden, but is sitting up and taking more notice of this right now than perhaps you have done in the past. So I'm wondering if speaking to a church leader is not necessarily a tattling kind of thing, but bringing it more to the church leadership that, yes, this is going on in our congregation, and maybe we do need to hear from people when we observe it or participate in it.
And I think it speaks to our mission of being a welcoming and inclusive congregation. To your point about yesteryear and we didn't report certain things, it was the same way with sexual offenses. We didn't report those things. And my career is human resources, and there came a point in my career where we instructed our employees to say something if they'd see something, because we were obligated by law to address certain offenses that would come up. And I think we've all shifted and moved into that space. And I think Fourth wants to be a place that's welcoming. And when it's reported, then the church is able to address it and respond to it and to deal with it, because we don't want it to continue. But I think socially, you know, there was a time when women were harassed sexually, and you couldn't. When I was in college, I had a professor who was using racial slurs in the classroom, and when I reported it to the dean of students, I was told to suck it up, drop the class, or take it again. Well, today, you know, there would be action taken on those things. But during that time in the Stone Age, when I was in college, it was a different socialization around those things. So I think we've evolved socially on those issues.
To say something about the speak up, because that's a tricky issue too, because you have to speak up without turning off the other person to the point of making them hostile toward what you're trying to say to them. And that takes a very interesting balance too, I think.
When you say the other person, do you mean the aggressor?
In the anti-racism training that some of you may have taken that this church has offered, and in other anti-racist training, particularly anything that's almost come out since the murder of George Floyd, there have been many anti-racist training. One of the key things that they talk about is being nice, right? Like almost as if we can no longer afford to be nice, because this work is so important. And perhaps we could take lessons, right, on how to speak up. I would like that myself, you know, because I'm outspoken, but I don't want to be cruel or mean. And at the same time, this work is important to me. Anti-racism work, period, is important to me. So learning how to do that and doing it is really important. I wanted to say something else about the church, though. This church, the leadership of this church does not necessarily always hear what we hear. So if I'm in the coffee hour, right, and I say, this is the thing with me, people know this, you know, they didn't shovel the sidewalks again, right? And somebody says to me, well, you know, those black people, they don't like the snow, right? What do I say in response to that? What do I say in response to that? So what I did when something like that happened to me, I went and told somebody in church leadership who was flabbergasted that somebody in this church would say that. You know, really. So these are the kinds of things that happened and happen here in our own church. And yes, we are moving in a direction where we want to be an anti-racist church, an active anti-racist church. So we want these things, and the leadership of this church needs this, because on the other side, the leadership of this church gets things like, well, we're not racist. This is not a racist church. So they got to have in their back pocket, well, here's some examples of racism in this church, you know, and that comes from us, from coffee hour, or us, or rooms like this.
And I also want to say, as a staff person and now a clergy, our church is striving to be better today than we were yesterday. And to me, this work that's going on is a part of that evolution. And I always recite this, and I know I pull it out of context, but there's a saying in the Presbyterian Church that we're always reforming within the will of God. And I think learning to tackle these issues and to address these issues is a part of us reforming and always reforming within the will of God to be better and to do better. I mean, it's to me a whole part of the Christian experience is that there's a transformation and that there's a change. But I look at this work as a part of moving into the direction of being totally the people God is calling us to be, and to see the humanity in one another. And there's just so much we have to unlearn because we've been socialized for years in a certain way, and this is a part of the work.
So we'll go on to the next question. Am I on 5? What role does empathy play in addressing microaggressions? A, reinforcing stereotypes. B, amplifying microaggressions. C, promoting understanding and respect. D, ignoring the issue. So the correct answer? C.
Did I hear C?
C, you heard C. C, promoting understanding and respect, which is really important because of the, we're not telling on people. We do want to promote understanding and respect, as Roger just preached to us. I mean, Robert just preached to us. So this, exactly. That's exactly right. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. So anyway, as our new pastor just preached to us, it is a matter of understanding and empathy. It's not calling people out particularly, which is what we're called to do in any Christian church. But this church is really good on giving us those messages.
Yeah. So item 6, how can individuals educate themselves about microaggressions? A, read books and articles. B, attend workshops. C, engage in open conversations. D, all of the above. D, all of the above. And were there any other thoughts and ideas about that? When I read that question, I also think about having conversations and showing curiosity with others around this issue, and showing curiosity with people who are not the same, think the same, look the same, walk the same. That's one thing that comes to my mind, is having relationships that are open conversations. Like Regan and I, we talk a lot back and forth. Do you have any other thoughts and ideas about how you can expand your knowledge about microaggressions.
I think one possibility would be if those conversations could be two-way, and if the person who is feeling aggressed could help to educate the person who did the aggression, and not just let it pass.
Yes.
I have a problem with that proposal because I feel like the black folks in our friendships and acquaintances are tired of having to tell us white folks how to act. And I think that's really hard for us white folks to understand because we want somebody to tell us how to behave. But you, who have suffered these micro and major aggressions all your life, are sick and tired of having to explain it.
Yes. Of course, I'm not black, so I'm not tired of explaining it. So I consider it my, I would say, spiritual responsibility to learn as much as I can and to explain it to you if you don't know, or explain it to the next person if they don't know, and then hopefully you'll explain it as you go, which in your case I know you would, but I do feel it's my responsibility to do that and to not put the burden on Robert or anybody else who's black. And I've had experiences, maybe you have too, where I have asked people, tell me what you want me to do. This was not that long ago, but right after George Floyd. Okay, I got the message now. So what am I supposed to do? And the message that came back to me all the time, right from the get-go, was you do the work, figure it out, do the work, which brings me to this book. Right? I just showed this to Robert, so see this book? Do the work, right? So this is a workbook, an anti-racist activity book. It's fabulous. It has like things you can write in and crossword puzzles, right? Stickers, that kind of thing. But it is by W. Kamau Bell and Katie Schatz. Do you know them? Do you know W. Kamau Bell? He's on CNN. And so there's a sense where this work is too serious to have something like this, but it's not too serious to have. I mean, it is serious work, but it's good to have something like this that you can be entertained as your thinking goes deeper on the anti-racism work. So I'll have it up here, and you can pass it around and look at it. But here it is. Like, do the work.
Other resources? So, great opportunity for a commercial. We have the racial equity table in coffee hour twice a month. In February, it's going to be every Sunday. And there are resources that are on display at that table every week. There are articles and books and a variety of resources that are available at that table. A couple of books that I think are really amazing. One is Dear White Peacemakers by Oshetta Moore, and she goes into, she's black female clergy. She goes into a lot of detail about microaggressions and her experiences in predominantly white environments. And what to me is awesome about that book is she speaks from her heart, and she really gives a gift to white people in that she really shares her experiences, which I could identify, being in a predominantly white space here, I could identify with so much of what she was saying. The other book that I think is really, really good is Silencing White Noise, and I think Nancy has it here with her. that book is really incredible, and there's a section in that book that addresses microaggressions in detail. And my personal favorite book is called Race Talk: How to Facilitate Conversations About Race, because that book names a lot of dynamic that we experience but don't have a name for it. And when I read that book, it gave me a lot of insights as to why I was feeling certain things in conversations and whatever. So those would be my top three, and then of course the Bible. But those would be my top books to really dive into to understand this dynamic that occurs.
Okay, we're going to do the last question. Do we do that? It's how do people educate? So our last question is what we just talked about. How do people educate themselves about microaggressions, which is read the books and articles, attend workshops, engage in open conversations, and all of the above. Did we
Yes.
just do that? So,
Yes, we did.
So,
We did.
so you know what comes with this hair? What I just did comes with the hair. All right. Yeah, anyway, so I'm in a good group for that, right? Chuck?
If I could back up a few steps. Number two, when you talked about, all the above, you were talking, you used an example, breaking into an existing conversation between two people to ask one of them a question. That's one that I can kind of identify with, I think, because I think we do that from time to time. How do you handle that then? Do you engage in the conversation first with both individuals and ask the one person separately, or do you, or do you engage in the conversation with those two people and then ask the one person separately, or do you say, when you've got a minute, could I talk to you, or how do you deal with that?
Are you talking about the example I gave about Nancy and Robert and coffee?
Yeah.
Just what you just said. Nancy, when you've got a minute, could you talk to me later, right? That kind of thing. And or include Robert in the conversation, right? Robert, Nancy and I have been talking about this thing. Maybe you're not interested in it, but, we'd be interested in your opinion, that sort of thing. But, like the art of conversation, just the idea, like at this church, is to include people, You almost create, with three people, a community of interest, that kind of thing, yeah.
Oh, and one of the pieces of feedback I've received from our volunteers, and this sounds really basic, but I've had volunteers tell me they've been in groups of people where no one has talked to them, or individuals were making plans to go to lunch or whatever, and no one extended an invitation. I mean, some of this is just really basic, but the last volunteer survey I did, which was in September, it was really loud in that survey about cliques in our church. And so it's just, to me, about being polite and kind, and when people are in the room or in the space, is making the effort to include them. And that's not just about race. I mean, that can be white on white or whatever, but it's just thinking about ways you can acknowledge others who are sharing space with you. So what we want to talk about right now, how are we doing on time? So, do we have time for this?
I think it's better to talk.
Okay.
I would like to say, though, talk about this a minute. We have a video that Robert showed. We were talking about this afternoon. Is it okay if I talk about this?
Sure.
It is Asian woman, I believe, anyway, who has about a 7 or 8 minute video on microaggressions. So what I just said to Robert is, let's keep the conversation going instead of breaking. And after we looked at the video, I said to Robert, is there a video with a black person talking, right? Can we have a video where there's somebody black talking? Because that seemed, you know, to me, this conversation tonight is really about anti-black racism and anti-black microaggressions. So, and we have all these other, you know, things. So Robert said, yes, there's some of those too. Yes, we have some of those, but sometimes white people are more receptive to a non-black speaker. Sometimes white people are more receptive to a non-black speaker. And he said that to me, and I said, you know what? I can't talk anymore, right? I mean, we had talked through what we were going to do tonight, but I just felt like I really couldn't talk about it anymore. It hit me so deeply that that is true, you know, that is true. So this is something that, as a result of my friendship with Robert, right, and his generosity in letting me in on some of these kind of secrets that I harbor and don't know, right, that it can change me. And I feel like it did change me today. I really feel as though something happened to me in that conversation. Is it okay to talk?
One of the, what's important in this video clip, it talks about the negative impact of microaggressions. And it you know, it talks about the impact on mental health, and it talks about how some microaggressions push people into a state of suicide or being suicidal. You know, there are certain communities that have black communities have higher incidences of high blood pressure, hypertension, and stress, and things that are a direct result of microaggressions. So, and just this thing where people feel like they are not connected to the community that they've made a commitment to be a part of, and that has really negative effects. And there are people who kill themselves because they experience, I mean, that's across all groups. So that's one of the really important things that is pointed out in this video, is that it's not just a simple statement. And the worst thing you can say to an individual who responds and says, this doesn't feel good to me, or I don't like how this looks and feels, is to say, oh, you're being overly sensitive, or they didn't mean it that way. But I just want to encourage us, again, to show more curiosity and try to say, well, tell me more about how you're feeling and what you're feeling. Because some microaggressions are terminal. You know, people kill themselves and do bodily harm. But thinking about the negative effects of microaggressions, and it's not just, and all of us do it on some level, in some way, because of what you pointed out about how we used to be, and we didn't tattle and we didn't speak up about those things. But it's all groups, and we have to learn how to expand our grace and mercy margins so that we are creating a space for people to be included. And I have to say, that's one of my biggest frustrations in my job at this church, is because time and time and time again, volunteers come to me and say, this group made me feel like an outsider. And we have to, and I put, again, our mission statement up there because we've made a commitment to be welcoming and inclusive and loving, and it takes a lot of work. You know, it's not easy because there's so much we have to unlearn in the process, and it's okay. You know, it's okay to feel the frustration and not knowing what to do and how to do it, but we have to work through it, you know, make a commitment to work through it. And that's what the anti-racism, what is our Racial Equity Council called, that Nanette and I staff here at the church. It's really called to dismantle, identify and dismantle those places in our church where there are barriers for inclusion, and to help us understand all of those blind spots we have where we are promoting these microaggressions in such a way it's harming people. And so that's not who we want to be, I know. So.
I just want to give an example of how microaggressions hurt people. So if any of you saw the MLK King movie, or I guess it was, that was on, I think it premiered last night. It's on Hulu. And so Malcolm X, did I say that? Anyway, it's MLK and Malcolm X. Malcolm X, when he was in school, he it looked like he was in an all-white school, but anyway, he said, his teacher said in front of the class, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" or something like that. And he said, "I want to be a lawyer." And his teacher said, "Well, for your people, it would probably be better if you were a plumber or electrician or something," whatever, I can't remember right. And Malcolm X, the next thing you see is Malcolm X is in jail. Well, first he, you know, you see why he was in jail. But he's in jail. That's the next thing you saw. So there's a really good example of a microaggression hurting someone, right? Him, you know, and he was, as we all know, he went on, after he got out of jail, went on to be a fairly influential black leader, maybe more influential in his death than he was even in life.
And I want to make one comment about nonverbal microaggressions. There's a story that has stayed with me all these years. It was my very first Diversity 101 class, which was taught by a middle-aged white male. And we didn't talk about microaggressions, and we didn't use that language back then. But he shared a story of his rearing, and he said that his mother, on Saturdays, they would go into Famous Bar in downtown St. Louis, which was our version of Marshall Fields. And he said whenever they would approach 2 or 3 black people together, she would squeeze their hands, or she would put her arms around them and pull them in closer. And he learned, and he said she never said a word, but he learned from that there was something different and bad about these people. So there are ways we do microaggressions, and we convey certain feelings and thoughts that are a lot of times nonverbal, and we can reinforce that through our actions and our behaviors. Questions. We've been doing all the talking, so I know there have to be some questions or comments out there.
Okay, I just wanted to say something about, you know, the first part about in terms of it's intentional or not. My children's father is black, and they're fair complected, but they're sun worshipers. And so my oldest son, he said, people come up to me and say, "What are you?" And I would say, "What do you tell them?" And he said, "What do you think I am?" I said, "What do they say?" You know, they're not asking about his age or sexual orientation or religion. And so when I say, "What do you think I am?" he said, "I've heard everything. Indian, black, white, Hispanic, Italian." And that would kind of end it all. But I don't think that was intentional or harmful or just stupid. Well, exactly.
I do think that's harmful because it makes your child feel other. I mean, who else is asked, what are you? I mean, if someone came up to anybody else in the room and said, who are you? I can't figure it out. How would that make you feel?
Well, this is at the age where high school, he's telling me these things.
And what do you think the message is there? Yeah, yeah.
If any of you were here Wednesday night when Robert P. Jones was here discussing his book on white supremacy, the name of which I've just forgotten, he talks about in the book too, I grew up white. I wouldn't say I knew I was white. I would never have said I was white. I just was the dominant culture, the dominant race, the dominant color. That was it, you know, and everybody did white things, no matter what color they were. They did white things. They, you know, when I went to school, if there were black children there, they did the white things. They did whatever we did, you know, we were the dominant culture. We were the dominant governing body in any situation that I was in. And Jones makes a point of saying, we thought that was good. Best, better, that was good. So when I say that to somebody, what are you? I'm saying, you're not good like me, right? So that's the base there. This is good. What you are, whatever it is you are, right, it's not. So this is, I don't want to talk about politics, please, but this is sort of the basis of white supremacy and where it's going as far as people who worship the former president. Is he is giving us the good, right? He's keeping those people out who are not good, which is white, right, or, you know, a different color. He's keeping the race white, which we grew up believing, you know, in our base selves, psyche, that was the good. So what this work does is hopefully breaks that down. So my dream is, I don't think I'll see that in my lifetime, so it's my dream is that that will be over. And I was talking to somebody about our grandchildren don't have this. They don't seem to have this. I don't know about you, Mary, but your children, but they've got a different view. They never say, you know, my black friend. Whereas if I had a friend in high school or grammar school, it would be my black friend, you know, or my Hispanic friend, or my friend from Mexico. I still say that. So I don't want to say that, but I still say that. And I'll say it as a way for you to know that I have these kinds of friends. Like I'm a good person because I have these friends. But that's not the message that anybody hears. Everybody hears the message of white is good, white is better, white has the power, white is superior. And so what Mary is saying about that microaggression towards her children, right, is what I give off all the time without that example in different ways.
Could I say something? A lot of the references we've had so far this evening is African American and black. I didn't hear anything about lesbians, gays, disabled, and it's a little confusing to me and baffling. And I've heard this a lot from Shannon about we have to be an inclusive church. All people should be welcome here. Blacks should be welcome here. And I look around the congregation. Where are the blacks? What is the population of the church is way out of whack with the demographics of the city of Chicago. And there's emphasis on supremacy, white supremacy, talk about how to speak to blacks, how to be, but where are they? This has occurred to me the last 5 years. The issue is, what is the population of blacks at Fourth Presbyterian Church? And why is it so out of whack and we're so welcoming? So that's...
Well, one thing I will say to you, I can't speak for all the blacks who come in the door, but I do know several non-whites who have left this church because they experienced microaggressions and because they did not feel. And I have seen the steady exodus of non-white people leaving our congregation for that. So I can only speak for me, but I do personally know individuals who have left here because this did not feel like a place they could call home.
Well, that's the issue. If this has been going on, why isn't a workshop? How are we refusing blacks? How are we dealing with blacks? Get black people in here, talk to us, find out what's wrong here. Why don't you come back? That's the issue, rather than talking about how to deal with black people in our neighborhoods, whatever. I am baffled how this church could be emphasizing relationships with blacks, and I don't see blacks.
So we live in a white neighborhood, which white people made white. So
Affluent neighborhood.
white people made this neighborhood white through racial restrictive covenants. So there's a racial restrictive covenant that was signed in 1933, November 1st, 1933, that included almost every property from Lake Michigan to the Chicago River to Wells to Diversey. That racial restrictive covenant was signed by property owners, and it said that we will not sell or rent our property to Negroes. Negroes are allowed to live in the basement or in the garage if they work for us as chauffeurs or maids. The description of Negro was anybody who was 1/8 Negro, right? So that was signed by people who live in this neighborhood. And then we had redlining after that, where black people were not allowed to get mortgages in this neighborhood. So white people made this a white neighborhood, right? So our job now is to figure out how to come to terms with that, how to come to a reckoning of that, admit that we did that, and how to fix it, and how to repair it. And that's one of the bases of Robert P. Jones's book, which I alluded to before that when he was here. And I highly recommend, there's a video of that on our website, so I highly recommend that anybody who didn't see it on Wednesday night, or even if you did see it, watch it again.
It would seem to me that all these behaviors you're talking about are learned. They are not innate. Just like you mentioned where the mother pulled the two kids closer when they got near some black people, that those are learned behaviors. They are not innate. Anytime you see a whole bunch of little kids, regardless of race, playing together, they don't see color. They're just playing together. So we have to be careful what we're teaching our kids and our grandkids and so forth.
Yes, and I think I made this statement earlier that this is all about how we're socialized, and socialization is how we are taught and conditioned, and you are exactly right. There's a really interesting study about children when they're really young, how they play together and they don't see their differences, but as they get older, that all goes away. And then when they get to a certain point in their teen years, then they start to take on the ways of the dominant culture. And they start to see their difference, and then they start to socialize around those differences.
Oh, Judy, go ahead.
Well, I was going to cite something. I am a member of a Unitarian church up on the north side, and we wrestle with this every church does, and we've been working on this for a long time. And one of our black members gave us an example not very long ago that really resonates with my heart. And she said to us, and she was speaking up at the front and all the rest of us sitting back, and she said, "I want you to repeat after me. Hello. Hello." And we repeated it several times. And she said to us, "If you say that when we walk into this environment, we will feel welcome." Nothing more than simply hello as a starting point.
Well, we happen to have a pastor in this room who's written a whole book about hospitality and teaches it. And Ninette, would you like to say something about that?
I mean, it's been said.
Yeah.
Hello, say hello, take the action, open the conversation. I want to thank Robert and Regan for all that you are bringing to us here tonight, the examples that you've given us. And this is the workshop. This is the workshop to learn about how we're not being welcoming. It's not that we want to be mean or unwelcoming. We want to be welcoming, but sometimes we don't even see it. And so we're learning from Robert and Regan and others like them. And we're learning from the books we read and the movies we watch and all those great ideas that they gave us. So hospitality, how do we open our hearts and minds? How do we become self-aware of the biases that we have that we're not even aware of? So I just thank you both and reaffirm everything that they're saying and encourage us all to be kind and also be brave when we realize, oh my gosh, that thing I just said kind of implies that there's something wrong with this person I'm meeting, or that thing that I said, I didn't mean it to be insulting, but we need to be self-reflective about how sometimes it is kind of implies something negative that we hadn't even thought of, because like Robert and Regan have said, this is the air we breathe. This is the water we swim in. This is how we've been socialized to think about people and groups of people in certain ways. So there's a lot of unlearning we have to do so that we can live into our discipleship of Jesus, you know, to love as he loved, to welcome as he welcomed, seeing the humanity, the holy image of God in every single human. We're going to have to push through some of our fears, and we're going to have to make mistakes, which we hate. We're going to have to realize we did a thing that hurt somebody, and we really just don't want to hurt anybody. So that's just my effort to reaffirm everything that Robert and Regan are bringing us tonight. And I thank you so much for the gift that you've shared with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Ninette. Thanks. Unfortunately, me, it goes with the hair, Nancy Thompson's the only person whose name I can remember to thank for tonight. And probably because I knew her name yesterday. So thank you to the Cornerstones group, all of you. I think I met most of you here tonight, but anyway, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate it because I've learned a lot just today from doing the work, do the work. Thank you very much, Robert. Want to say anything, Robert? No. I just would like to close in prayer, Nancy. Okay, do you mind? Okay, do you want to say first? Okay, all right. Holy Spirit, quiet our minds. Allow us to soak in what we've heard tonight, what we feel tonight. Keep our bodies holy. so that we can do the work. Thank you, Jesus.
Still have to get this out. I assume it's this one.
Well, on behalf of Cornerstones, I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight. This was great. I've had a number of people say that they did not know what Cornerstones was all about and wasn't sure if it was still an organization within the church, and so I'm glad to see you all here. And I hope you'll take notice of the flyer we left on the table that has the programs for the rest of the year. And so we hope to see you all again sometime soon. And we have a program actually on white supremacy in April. So,
And who's going to teach it?
It's
Tom
Dozman.
Tom Dozman. So, yeah, those in adult ed, and others, we really love Tom Dozman. He's going to teach it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, thank you all. Good to see you.
Thank you.